thank you so much to Myisha for this incredibly stimulating talk. I just want to say to those of you who are used to philosophy colloquiums, we're doing this today slightly differently. So instead of we normally have a break in between the talk and the question and answer session. We don't have a break, but we are ending earlier. So don't worry, we're still having a reception though. Okay, so what we're going to do then is spend the rest of the time up until just before 5 p.m. Taking some questions and answers, and I think probably thinking a little bit about the notion of the kind of criticism that Myisha thinks is constructive as part of solidarity care. Perhaps that might be an interesting thing to think about when we ask our questions as well. I'm just going to say I'm going to hand over to Hedy at the end of the final few minutes. Just for the final few minutes, I'm just going to hand over to one of my co-organizers after we've had the question and answer session to close off the symposium today. So who'd like to start us off with some comments or questions for Myisha? Perhaps we can follow the same norms that we usually do in the philosophy department, as which we ask students who want to speak, give them an opportunity to speak first. And I've already got a student over here who has the so
I know. You can go first.
Okay, Tim, go ahead.
You gave eggs to the patriarchy.
Yeah, we all are. So first of all, I wanted to thank you for an amazing talk. It's with a heavy heart that I say that this is probably one of the best talks that I've ever witnessed. I think I don't speak for just myself. I want to say that you've not only encouraged me in your talk, you've also given language for me to jump off on, you might have pushed me off into the deep end, which is fine with me. But I wanted to ask you about this problem with moral grandstanding that we find among woke folks. I've found that since the election, he who must not be named, that a lot of people have a lot of feelings and a lot of perspectives are being shared, and a lot of feelings are welling up in me, or have been welling up in me, well, long before the election, but especially after the election. And I've been thinking about intersectional subjecthood, being constituted intersectionally, and having to be, or pushing yourself to be an ally to more than one group of people at the same time. And so I found that there are so many different people who are constituted in so many different ways that there is a persistent oppression Olympics going on in various academic departments across the UW campus, but also across universities and across Twitter and across Facebook, and it's dragging me down. And it's dragging me down, but that doesn't matter that much. It's dragging everybody down. It's dragging the discourse down. It's dragging so much down. So here's my question, is how do you recommend that we all navigate between different communities who are demanding or asking or requesting different things at different times when they come into conflict with one another? Yeah.
Now, when you say conflict with one another, what is the basis of that conflict again?
The conflict is between the ways that one community will articulate their kinds of struggles at the cost of other communities. Like, I can hang out with as many radical black feminists as I want. That's not going to stop them from talking about Taco Tuesday at the bar. When I have so many friends who are Chicanas or from other countries in Latin America who are worried that their families might be deported. And so people rally around certain kinds of cultural artifacts at the cost of others. And those communities will rally around cultural artifacts at the expense of radical black feminists or radical black Chicanas. And black Chicanas. And the mixed race comes from, there's so many different people I have to be responsible for. And we all have to be responsible for each other. So how do we do that? How do we balance it?
Yeah, so let me just say this. So I think there's a difference between deciding which movements you are now going to be officially a part of. And what I mean by that, you're going to the meetings,
yes,
right? You're like proactively organizing and resisting, right? And I can see that can probably be impossible to do for every issue that's existing in the liberal sphere, right? So I think, given the fact that I'm trying to complete a dissertation, it is impossible to every meeting, that would just take up all of our time.
Yeah.
But I think you can still be in solidarity with folks.
Yes.
Right? Even if you never go to any of their meetings, you can still be in solidarity with them. So I think there are two actions there, right?
Great.
And you can still consider their issue that they're facing, that they're fighting against, as important, even if you have a commitment to your whatever issue, right? It's the response that we give to those individuals, right? It's the care that we give to those individuals that I'm concerned with, right? So you can still care for them even if you're not in the front lines. What I also think that's probably the problem, and someone mentioned this earlier, is a lack of empathy. I know that sounds touchy.
No.
Empathy is basically trying to imagine yourself in the shoes of another individual, not as if you were you, but as if you were them, right? This is Adam Smith's kind of account of sympathy in this reading, right? So the reality is that I think the oppression of Olympics can stop if for a moment you can imagine what it is like to be here all your life, this is all you know, but if you get stopped by the police, you can go back to a country that you have not known.
Yeah.
Like, can you put yourself, imagine that. Don't try to compare it to your experience, right? Just try to imagine if you were there. And I think if you do that kind of authentically and realistically, then you will see why their issue matters, right? And I think we need to do more of that in order to get over that oppression. But I do think that you can be in solidarity with folks, you have empathy with folks, but it doesn't require all this, I think it's two different kind of things that we're talking about. I think the first is much more difficult. The latter, I think all of us can do. I think the problem is we haven't done that enough.
Yeah, I totally agree. But what if you're, what if they call into question your identity? So what if black folks say that your allegiance to one group comes at the cost of your blackness? This has happened to me many times since.
But you're a philosopher, right?
Yeah.
An argument just doesn't sound good.
It doesn't.
So what's your counter argument? But you're on the spot here.
Oh God.
That's just not a valid argument at all. I doubt it sound.
Right.
It just doesn't sound right, but it's also not sound for you. So it's also not valid. And I know you don't want to hear that from people that's part of an identity but let's just speak with it. The argument doesn't sound well. So they're wrong. You're not wrong.
Okay. I feel better. Thank you.
Okay, anyway, do you want to get up because the sound in this room is
okay.
really in the back of the room.
No, it's okay. I have a sufficiently loud voice. I can project. I just want to echo Tim and say that this was by far, hands down, one of the best talks we've had.
This cannot be Talk Olympics.
We're
in tandem.
Yeah, we're just like being in solidarity as the only two black kids in the department. And I also wanted to say, like, for me personally, this was really important. I had a couple moments where I was like, I'm sure, I don't know if you get this, but like I get a lot, like other black folks in the academy asking me like, why are you in philosophy? Like it's such a toxic space, blah, 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 all that reason.
Yeah.
And feeling like I constantly have to justify myself of like why I'm within these disciplinary boundaries that admittedly don't work for me very well. And so like, it's not substantive. But then, you know, I'll like talks like this, I'm like, oh yeah, this is why philosophy, this is why. So I just wanted to thank you for that, because that was really productive. And so my question is this, I've been thinking a lot about, I too believe that everything Audre Lorde has ever written is also correct. And if you recall, she also has that passage, you know, like Black and third world women must constantly convince, actually I keep it with me on my phone. I always have it because it's, I've recently reorganized my life to think through this. She says, there's a constant drain of energy which might be better used in redefining ourselves and devising realistic scenarios for altering the present and constructing the future. You know this one?
I'm not. Yeah.
So,
no humility for the first criticism. That's not humility.
So what I'm thinking through is how this, is how these moments in Lorde intersect with the moments that you're picking up with to talk about care, and how the communities that we attend to, the members of the communities that we attend to, because your notion of solidarity is built on top of and within and constitutes these very same communities. And at the same time, it seems like, one of the things that we get from Lorde is that it seems even if you are pay attention to the ways in which you ought to be good to those around you, it seems unwise to invest in your oppressors in certain kinds of ways, right?
So tell me, what do you mean by invest? What does investment look like?
I'm thinking of, well, so for example, like one of, I read this, when she says, like, I'm just going to read it. Lesbians and gay men are expected to educate the heterosexual world. Women are expected to educate men. Black and third world people are expected to educate white people to our humanity. And you talk about the epistemic dimensions of care, that one of the things that care allows us to do, for example, is facilitate empathy. One of the things that, processes of empathy, I guess, one of the things that care allows us to do is come to understand the world in certain kinds of ways. But at the same time, just like you point to with the Black women who showed up for the anti-Trump rally, and then were also the only ones in the room at the missing DC Girls rally, it seems like Black women are constantly being made to be the vessels through which modernity is cognized by white knowers. Black women are constantly asked to pick up on Elise's terminology, surrogates for this new world, constantly being asked to facilitate, to uplift white folks out of racial ignorance, to uplift, to like get men of color to pay attention to gendered violence and how that's inextricable from white supremacy, right? So when we think about, does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was my actual question. I was trying to get to it, but then you were like, oh, what do you mean? So I was trying to explain what I meant.
This is the longest question.
I'm so sorry. So here's the deal. It seems prudent to divest from trying to uplift your oppressors in certain kinds of ways, especially since it can make it more difficult in certain kinds of ways to invest in these marginalized communities. The more time you spend trying to comfort the weeping white woman in a way that does not reinforce her fragility, it also saps you in certain kinds of ways. And so I'm guessing, like, my interest is how you would think through this question in relationship to care, like how to constitute these communities.
Yeah. So you notice that my emphasis today was not on how oppressed people can care for oppressors or whatever the case may be, opposing groups, right? My emphasis on how those other groups can do that, right? So in some ways, I think my talk kind of allowed me to escape that question in some ways, right? Because I don't want to figure that out for people of color has been doing it forever, right? I want us to get that back. So that's been my focus today, because I agree with everything you just said. But I also think, you said that you read the quote about educating about existence, and that's correct. I read a quote that was quite similar. And I think that just in philosophy proper, if we're still writing papers on how someone is a human being, that just goes to show people are failing morally. Like, we don't need to make that argument, right? And I think for Lorde, I think she has a point in that. We don't need to make that argument. And it's overworking people of color to try to make that argument for you. However, Lorde was an educator. right? She left stuff for us. One of her criticism was that the white feminist canon just consisted of work by white feminists. And now today we have the work of our Lord teaching us, uplifting us, right? So I think the uplifting work can take place, the education work can take place, but there's just certain educational stuff that we should not have to do. And I think that's the kind of boundary distinction that she was making. So we should educate people about slavery and reproduction. But to say that slaves are human, if we're still making that argument, that's problematic. And that's not on us to make. You need to talk to one of your white colleagues, or y'all need to, if that's still something, that is something that people should no longer have to make anymore. And I think that's something that she doesn't want us to do.
Hey, I've got Joey.
So, do I have to stand up?
Yes, I think, and project, please.
Okay.
Joey, are you a philosopher?
Yes.
I can tell. Comrade.
So I wanted to echo something that Tim had said. There's this concern that caring for one group might come at the expense of caring for others, and so there's a real an example that I've experienced with. There are some med schools that have programs that are dedicated to like indigenous or Native American medicine, where you practice cultural traditions and then go back to the tribe that you're a part of and kind of institute these along with westernized medicine practices. And part of the concern with being in these groups is you've got this group, this lump or this concept of indigenous or Native American, when really within that you've got a bunch of different tribes and different cultural practices. And there's been this institutional space that's created for indigenous or Native American students, but within that you've now got people kind of in-group fighting of saying what, you know, you can only hire so many faculty members that teach about one particular tribe's practices. How do you give enough space within this already small institutionalized space to accommodate more kind of people? And it seems like caring for indigenous, like the title indigenous people, comes at the expense of caring for some particular indigenous tribes at the expense of others. And if you're like an Ojibwe or Muskogee person, caring about that particular tribe might come at the expense of caring for some of the smaller, not as recognized tribes. And so Tim's concern, at least as I understood it, still seems relevant there. You're caring for this particular group just institutionally comes at the expense of.
So tell me how it comes at the expense, right? Because let me give you what I'm thinking about. I want to take my sister to Vegas, I think, right? She's been on my Facebook and noticed I've been traveling a lot, so she's like, when can I get by? So I gotta care for her. So we're gonna go somewhere, right? But to say that, the fact that I'm doing that at the expense of also not showing attention to my niece is probably extreme, right? So the focus now, given my sister's health, it just needs to be on her, right? If my niece calls me up, I got her, right? She needs someone to talk to, I'm there for her. But I just may give a little bit more resources, whether that's time or money, to my sister. But it doesn't come at, it's not necessarily by definition coming at the expense of my niece. Just more time investment, perhaps, right? More attention, perhaps. But I still care about. And here's the case of the reality. If you have any children, right? Sometimes it's that one child that just needs a little bit more attention at the moment. But the expense language, I think, is deadly there. But also, I don't know if that's sufficiently answering your question, but let me respond to something else that you said. I also think that institutions make it such that they give out so much limited resources. We're willing to kill each other. We're willing to do things that we probably would never do, right? Just to get those resources. That goes against all our intuitions. And I think when it comes to survival, that's just what people do. So I think the solution to that is that universities need to get more resources across the board. They need to care for a variety of people. And I think if you start at that level, then you wouldn't have that kind of competition of trying to figure out how things conflict in that regard. How to make that happen, I don't know. Response philosopher.
No, that sounded good to me. But the
I knew there was a but.
Yeah, well, the burden being on these institutional spaces need to be created. I guess the breaking up of certain cultures into context, saying like lumping indigenous peoples as opposed to individual tribes.
Yeah.
When you have universities saying, here's an indigenous program,
Yeah.
rather than here's a program for a particular tribe.
Yeah.
As a member of one tribe or another, as in part of this indigenous program,
Yeah.
it's hard. It seems hard to navigate what is my responsibility here
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
indigenous people versus my tribe.
Yeah.
But saying just these institutional spaces need to be created.
Yeah, and they create things in a way that also creates these other problems. So the way is kind of, they may have, the way in which I think to resist that is to say, well, this is how they have defined it, this is how we define it, this is how we break it down. Instead of allowing institutions to kind of do everything for us, to really provide a way for us to care for others, maybe we may need to resist some of the conditions and the limited standards that they have provided and supersede those.
Thank you.
Do I have any more students before I move on? Any students want to? Okay, I'm going to move on to Johanna.
Thanks. Thank you so much for, can people hear me? Thank you so much for your excellent talk. I really loved it. And my question is about solidarity and caring for people who may be really difficult to care for. And here I'm thinking this is coming out of my own attempts to look at care in institutions of incarceration and thinking about people. Of course, many people are wrongly incarcerated or over-incarcerated, but there are people who are incarcerated who have actually done really harmful things to other people. And I'm wondering, I just am wondering, how does solidarity work in that kind of context? How does care work with people who have committed certain kinds of harms? And do you have any, advice, insights, thoughts about that?
Now, in the prison example, are you referring to health care? What kind of care are you?
No, I'm
it's
actually more broadly the way you were talking about care. Yeah, not specifically health care. Yeah.
So then I would want to be very specific about if you're I'm not saying you're suggesting. So let's just say that you're arguing, or at least trying to deal with the argument that if a person has caused these particular harms, then it seems that what they deserve or what they should be privy to is a certain kinds of cares, and other kind of cares should be restricted to them. Is that something that you would say?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I guess I'm interested in I'm really interested in this issue, the question of solidarity and sort of reciprocity of care, and I don't know how to say this, but no, I'm not. I guess I'm interested in, often when people talk about working in or with folks who are incarcerated, there's kind of like certain groups of people that are framed as sort of deserving or worthy of care or solidarity, and then there are the so-called people who should be in prison or the worst of the worst, and those are not terms I endorse, but they are terms that get used. And so I guess, but at the same time, I also don't want to engage in care and solidarity that obscures harm that very real harm and violence that people may have actually been responsible for. So I guess I'm just sort of talking about that.
So here's my thinking. So, I have my concerns about the effectiveness of prisons and the way in which they treat individuals. And so for that fact alone, and I also am aware of the disparities in sentencing and all that other stuff. So I'm in solidarity with people who are in the carceral system. Right? Given those, I'm in solidarity. There are people, particular individuals, that can make me question why in the hell I am in solidarity, right? So it could be the case. I mean, I worked at a formerly incarcerated educational program, and there were just some individual, I'm like, yo, really? You don't want this? Why am I back? All these things. But then I remember the group that I'm in solidarity with. So you're always going to have the people in the group that make you question why you're in solidarity with the group, right? And it may make you question why you're even caring for that person, because that person perhaps don't deserve it. But the deserving is not based on the individual, it's based on the solidarity of the group. So you're committed to certain things, and you care for a person out of those commitments. I think in the carceral example, the person is a human being. I think one of the points I'm trying to make is that the person is a human being. We all, try not to curse, we all mess up. a lot of times we're not deserving. However, I mean, I don't think do you deserve care? I'm not too certain of that, right? So people in the foster system, no matter what they do in some ways, I still think that they deserve to be cared for as far as getting food. I think they deserve not to be in solitary confinement and get that kind of care. I think they deserve health care. And so I just think that there's certain cares that shall not be taken away from an individual because of what they do. If that's the case, then a lot of us wouldn't be taken care of in different instances in which we need it. So in the first case, I think, yes, there are individuals, a part of the group that you're in solidarity with that will make you question, but remember, it's not just the individual, right? Remember why you are in solidarity. And then the point that I take, I think that people just deserve to be cared for on a very basic level because of their humanity. I mean, our children are bad. We don't decide, you know what? You're not getting fed tomorrow. You don't deserve to eat. And we may say you don't deserve to play, Nintendo Switch, right? But that's a kind of care that's not a moral duty of any way. But I think there's certain cares that we just deserve because we're human. No matter how bad we are, how many times we disappoint each other, we're still human.
Don't take my Switch away.
I'm going to talk about Sarah, but Hetty had a point. I wanted to ask something on this point, so I'm just going to ask Hetty to.
I just was wondering, it's kind of related to I hope it's related. I'm not a philosopher, so sorry, I don't know how you're supposed to ask questions. Sorry, I didn't mean to offend. So, in your discussion of solidarity, how can we fit in? To be in solidarity, does that also mean that you cannot be a burden? And I know that sounds.
Tell me what a burden is.
So for example, in some Black feminist scholarship, there's this idea of the third burden. Black women are burdened by their race and their gender, and also as long as the destiny of Black men are tied to them, they're burdened by Black men. And I was thinking about this just in the case for the criminal justice system, that Black women are often the ones who are doing a lot of the care work. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, should I not be thinking about burden in that way because Black men's burden is really the result of these larger structural forces and that's the kind of care work we're talking about, ensuring that prison systems are doing what they're supposed to be doing, providing people with the right food and sneakers and all that kind of stuff. Does this make sense, or am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. Okay. Let me affirm you. You are intelligent. You are wonderful.
We should care for each other. But if you are if you need more care, for whatever reason, is that? Yeah. And I guess I'm just thinking about burden, just because it's something. Maybe it's a bad word to use, but it's one that some people use to talk about, like the state, for black women and sort of. Well, I was just thinking too of the movement and the kind of burdens that these women take on. Yeah. And it's almost like they're asking for support, but it's not even equal, maybe. Yeah. But maybe not. Maybe
but here's the thing. That's why this is the purpose of this talk. I think there are people who are overly and heavily burdened, right? Okay. I mean, the reality is that there are people in our society that tend to make more sacrifices than other people. Most of those people are of a racial and sexual sort, right? And the problem is that in a political society, we honestly we need sacrifice, but we also need reciprocity, right? So I'm with you to that end. But I also think that when you're overextended or when you become a burden in that care department, I think what's that showing is that there's no reciprocity. People are not sharing in the care. And I'm trying to get us to think about us caring for and about each other. Because if that is the case, then it's one person or one group is not going to be heavily have to do that. I also think, go back to the thing about self-care. In some ways, perhaps some people need to self-care to relieve people who've been caring for them so much. And so what I mean by this, I'm not going to go with the first example. Okay, I will. I've been picking on the patriarchy. So for example, if you don't know how to cook as an adult, and you put all that burden on your partner to do that, and you're overburdening that person, that overburden is the result of you not being able to take care of yourself, right? And just a lack of self-care in that regard. Yeah. So maybe you need to teach yourself how to cook, right? So that's one end, right? But then there's also the other end. Let's just say that you don't have the capacity to do that, right? And of course, the matriarch or person in the family to do that. Other people need to share in that, right? So I just think that anytime there's an overburden, there's care that's not being given, whether that is self-care or whether that is solidarity care from other persons.
Next on my list, I've got Sarah.
Okay, thank you so much. That was a great talk. And I hope that after I ask my question, you don't think, but were you actually listening? So
I'm ready.
it feels like there's a little bit
Put
of
my
a
chapstick on.
A little-
Ready.
Here it comes. There's a little bit of a tension in what you said, and I think that tension is probably just there for all of us all the time, but between, I like the way you framed it, that criticism is a kind of care
Yeah.
in the right moment for the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
But that on the other hand, it's really important not to be criticizing, asking for evidence, second guessing people, right? So some of the time you need to listen and
Yeah.
just hear the report, you said.
Urge to write. I'm sorry.
No riskiness, right? Just hear
Yeah.
the report and listen.
Mhm.
But then criticism is a kind of care. And so you said the criticism is a kind of care, like don't validate the white fragility, which seems
Yeah.
right.
We want to advocate for. And I think that's a problem. For example, how much is the Q&A going to be recorded? I mean, is the Q&A recorded? Is the Q&A going to be posted online?
If you like.
Okay, I'm not going to use this example then. We're finished.
I can stop recording for a while.
I'll tell you afterwards. I tell you afterwards.
We're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to take 2 questions in a row. If you could keep them as brief as possible, that would be great. So I've got one question over here and one question over here.
I can do that. I'm not a philosopher. So I work in public health, and one of the challenges in doing public health research, and those who work in medicine and anyone else who does research, is that we come from this long history of scientific method and development, and we have certain practices and policies that we have to follow. And inherently, these are clearly related to a very stained history, not only in this country, but around the world when it comes to oppression and inequality. And Sarah asked about how do we, or when do we know we're supposed to criticize someone? And my question is, when we come from systems that are not woke,
Yeah.
how, not when, but how do we actually respond and change those systems? And there are individuals within them with whom we can interact. But I think there's a broader question of some of the systemic challenges that need to be woken.
Yeah.
And sorry, Myisha, before you answer that,
I'm not going to answer. I'm sorry. Next question.
Here's one more question.
Better know that.
Okay. I also am not a philosopher, but have a
You can stop prefacing it with that.
I'm also a student, another profession. I didn't go at the beginning, but I wanted to kind of write this out to keep it brief. I don't know if that's going to be effective, so sorry. Try to go fast. So, and I'm not even sure this isn't exactly a question, but I really, really wanted it to be. But I know I'm going to go home and kind of look this up, and there were so many places where your talk kind of touched on this idea. So I'm just going to put it out there and see what your comments are. Maybe that can move me forward a little faster. So when we look at Native American and indigenous ideas of sovereignty, not sovereignty in the legal sense that's like been written up by white men basically, but tribal ideas of sovereignty, which there are many different ones and as many as there are tribes. But one of the main underlying themes is kind of like removing a structure of authority where like humans are stewards over things. And likewise, removing the structure where self-care and reciprocity or taking care of me and taking care of you are even different things. And you kind of mentioned this when you give an example of like, your yoga teacher is taking care of you, and so taking care of her is taking care of you. And so I'm wondering, you know, it seems like there are so many intersections with your talk around self-care and caring for other people. Are these things really different from each other? And lastly, with the airplane example, this is one place where it seems like there really is a clear difference, but I can't help but notice that in that example, the airplane is crashing. So, you know, if we are taking care of each other before the airplane crashes, like, is it still the same? There's a difference. I have to take care of me first and then take care of you. That's all.
Okay. Let me try to respond to yours first, and not in any sense of importance. So you asked, is self-care, are they actually different from each other than solidarity care? I mean, I think my first thought is causally, right? So, I mean, you did mention the latter, but that example of the airplane, I mean, I honestly believe that we're that interconnected. that they are connected to each other, right? So for example, I'm taking care of myself by, going to school and trying to be the best person of the mind I can possibly be, trying to get that money. And by me taking care of myself, I have beneficiary. Like I mentioned my sister, I'm not rich at all. I can take my sister, if I had a real cheap flight on Spirit and just take her. Okay. Where was that? So as a result of me taking care of myself, right, then I'm able to take care of my sister. And this is in addition to the example that I mean about it's impossible to take care of yourself. Because it's jointly digital. So I just think it's just we're so connected in that way that they intersect, they're connected. One causes the other, one leads to just that. So that's why I want to kind of challenge us to not think of self-care as like this separate entity in some ways. I think it's an illusion to think of it as something distinctly different. And you mentioned, use the example, in the case, of course, I must help myself first because the plane is about to go down. That's the case with just life in general, right? The plane was always going down, right? It's going to be, we have doomed situations in which, and so I'm just using the analogy. The reality is that the plane is always either shaking, going to crash, or whatever. And I think our obligations to each other are still the same. And then the other question about how to awake systems, that is a dissertation. But I can give you some examples, right? So it is the case now in philosophy, where there's not too many women, also not too many Black women. I know them all. That's how much of a small number it is. But what is happening, what we're finding is folks that were junior scholars in, say, the 90s or early 2000s are now have senior positions, right? So you notice that the type of grad students that are now in departments look different. Starting to look different. They also are starting to do things that are quite different. Why is that the case? Were some people retired that were didn't believe women were intelligent enough? Didn't think that blacks were actually doing philosophy? So the way that the system has been awakened is that those people left and the woke folk now got positions of power. So the question, I think the challenge is when you get the position of power, are you going to stay woke or are you going to go to sleep like everybody else was? Right? So I think that's a way to change the system. But also, this is connected to the comment that I gave about organizations and the discourse and all that other stuff. It's something you just have to occupy. You just have to #resist. There's just some things you have to do a little bit different than what the system does in order to educate them in a very indirect way. But that would just be a couple of responses to that. And we can probably talk during the reception about what occupying would be. I don't know, but maybe we can talk about that.
Thank you so much, Myisha. I know that there are more questions, but yes, as Myisha says, over reception, let's chat about it. I'd like to thank Myisha, but don't run away because Hetty's just going to say a few words in closing as well. But let's